What's up, everyone? Welcome to Simulation. We are in Chicago. We're going to be talking about the future of education, and we're with Davis Jones. What's up, man?
Hi.
Thanks for coming on to the show.
Pleasure. I'm excited.
Greatly appreciate
I
it.
have watched your content in the past. I know that you're going to challenge us to think differently, and I think I'm excited about that.
I think you've already challenged yourself to think differently about education, and you've built a company around it, Eazl, Eazl.co, E-A-Z-L.co, right here. Go and check them out, and we'll be talking about, of course, what they're up to, and in general, kind of the evolution of education over time and where we're headed. And yeah, let's start unpacking this. So, all right. We are so grateful that we evolved on this planet. Now we have consciousness, we have all these buildings, we have this education system, ubiquity, water, food, electricity, all these cool things. And something that has been evolving over time is the way that we teach young kids. And we've went from...
Well, I would actually...
Yeah.
I'd kind of like to, I think it's a good time to insert that education has changed a lot because it's a lifelong pursuit now, particularly with technological disruption. And specifically, 54% of people who enroll in basically higher education courses and programs in the United States, they're now what we call independent learners, which means that they are financially independent of their parents. They tend to be over 24. They usually have families, they have jobs. So the whole concept of education as a young person's thing is kind of out the window now.
I like how you brought that up, and especially because it's the love of learning. I believe it's philomath, the love of learning,
Okay.
and the just importance of lifelong learning, that this is not something that goes on from 0 till 18 or 0 to 22 and then you're done. This is something that you're constantly loving, learning, insatiable curiosity.
Well, how fabulous is it, right? To just be like actually, I think that Buddhism has a fantastic metaphor for this. Buddhism talks about the garden of your mind. And I've often had fun meditations imagining the garden of my mind and how beautiful it is to have beautiful statistics knowledge and beautiful technology knowledge and history knowledge and sociology knowledge and all those things developing in the garden of your mind.
I really love the garden of the mind analogy because it really does take planting seeds and then watering them over time to gain the knowledge and have those flowers blossom throughout life. And occasionally you'll get a massive tree, which is when you go really hard if studying a specific field of knowledge.
You have to nurture your garden or whatever. It's not like something you can just leave alone. It's a lifelong pursuit of making your inner self and your inner mind really beautiful and diverse and lush.
Yes, yes. And so we kind of evolved to teach kids at young ages about things like language, how we can talk to each other, things like how to use certain tools. And so we ended up kind of evolving with that until, let's just jump all the way to, I mean, we had music and writing and, reading, and then we got into a lot of the scientific revolution happened during the Renaissance period. So we got into a lot of the macro scale and micro scales of the sciences, chemistries, biologies, physics. And so now we kind of see ourselves with the educational system infrastructure that's still here from the post-industrial revolution
Yeah, let's
era.
talk about the purpose of a university. A purpose of a university was really to be a place where physical books could be collected when they were expensive. And primarily they were around to educate theologians who were going to go back and be clergy people in places not in the university. And the idea was that if you had these beautiful libraries, then you could have access to all the world's knowledge. Obviously, that's not the situation we're in anymore with the beauty of the internet and information being so readily available. It's just we don't necessarily need physical books as much as maybe they did in the 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th centuries.
So initially the purpose of the university was this massive collection of books for people to be able to go and access and gain knowledge.
Because books were so expensive, right? I mean, back, you know, I don't know, I'm not a book historian, but I mean, you're talking, you know, pretty significant investments to get a book in 1600s, right? And so that meant that education was not accessible to everybody. And so as a part of making it accessible, it was like, why don't we all gather here? We can share these books, and then education is more widely available. And that's really the reason that universities began. And then the clergy people would go and be the smartest person in their village or whatever, and they would help instruct people about living their lives based on the philosophies and the beautiful things they learned at university.
So cool. Okay, so then this was around the 1600s-ish?
Well, you'd have to look. I mean, I'm pretty sure the oldest university in the world is in Leuven in Belgium. And I believe, if I have to pull something out of my booty, it'd be probably in the 17th century, I would imagine that was established. I'm sure your audience will hold me to account on that if I'm incorrect. But yeah, so those are the earliest ones. I mean, I believe Harvard in the United States and Yale, these are late 19th century, maybe mid 19th century here in the U.S. There might be some older than that. I'm not totally positive, but you know, that's kind of the time frames you're looking at.
Okay, so now the general idea for children ended up kind of evolving around, like, let's say, whatever, 1850, 1900, this just general idea of, okay, you get some literature, you become literate, you get some history, you get some math, you get some science. Rarely did we teach things like emotional intelligence, yeah, and all these kind of these newer ideas of how, of what we could potentially teach as education. So,
but it's actually kind of interesting, because if you think about that stuff, these concepts of emotional intelligence or empathy, right, compassion, the science of happiness. Maybe you and your audience is not familiar with this yet, but some of you maybe you are. Yale's most popular course last year was called, I think it was called The Art of Happy Living, or The Art of a Successful Life.
That was their most popular course?
Most popular course, yep. And now Berkeley, at University of California, Berkeley, they have a whole center. I think it's I forget the name of it, but it's the study of happiness, right? And ironically, it's interesting because if you think about it, that's the stuff that used to be taught in the spiritual parts of religion. Mm-hmm. And when you see the introduction of the really clinical way of treating religious and subjects, which is needed, but basically in the early part of the 20th century, we started to believe that you don't study society through a religious lens, you study it through a sociological lens, through data. But that clinical approach strips out the spiritual aspect of what those subjects were seeking to explore. And now we've kind of replaced, or we're starting to replace the gap of spiritual education with these sort of more scientifically driven approaches to traditionally spiritual topics like empathy and compassion and human centricity.
Okay, so this is crazy that the most popular course at Yale was about happiness and the art of living. That's just blowing my mind right now, because I think that's a huge transition, because we've never had that until now, and that actually in the West, because in some places in the Eastern Hemisphere, it was definitely more common to have courses taught, especially through religious contexts, maybe like Buddhism, things like this, that just certain aspects of emotion regulation, certain aspects of happiness, of oneness with nature, all these different.
Well, and I think that it would be imprudent to omit the Greek tradition of education. If you think about Aristotle,
and Jesuit too, was very polymathic, which is very interesting.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
But the reason I wanted to bring that up is that this idea of having subject-specific teachers was not the way that education always began. And when you talk about polymath type people, well, yeah, and I mean, somebody like in the Greek tradition, you had a small group of people who would be taught by a tutor, like a really smart person like Aristotle. And so it's interesting that over time we've evolved to this model where only a PhD in economics can teach you Economics 101. And I would question that if you want to talk about that in a minute. And when you have a situation where you are learning from one tutor more, you're learning from somebody who can kind of weave together the subjects, it can introduce the opportunity for a little bit more of a holistic education.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, let's definitely stay on this for a moment. So we have both the kind of multidisciplinary understanding of knowledge. That way, maybe a PhD in econ has built a massive tree in their mind garden.
We have the econ tower.
They have the econ tower, which is fantastic. But then how econ relates to commodities being traded across the world, or how it relates to art. How it relates to art, yeah.
Right? Aristotle in that model can say, listen, you can see incredible economic trade-offs in the balancing of a beautiful marble Greek sculpture, right? Because if it's out of balance, it falls apart. Now look at a market. If the market's out of balance, then that also falls apart. That's a dot that's a node that is only capable from seeing these two dots presented in this different way. And I think that when you talk about the structure of higher education, you have to bring in the question, is it necessary that a researcher teaches? Is it necessary that a researcher teaches?
And what do you think about that?
Definitely not, particularly in the 101, subject matter. The bulk of people's higher education experience is learning the basics of a subject. Sociology 101, government, English 101, econ 101, biology 101, finance 101, right? You have to take your cores, right? And so is it necessary that somebody who has that tower of econ teaches you econ 101? Or is it more necessary that somebody who can get you excited about the field of economics teaches you econ 101?
And makes it super relatable and fun. Exactly. And then you get that in the econ 101, and then you can get a more of a PhD introduction to it if you so choose to pursue making a tree in your garden.
Yes, I would argue that for master's level and PhD level students, it's necessary that you learn from a researcher. But in the 101 stuff, I don't think that there's really hardly any reason that you need to learn from somebody who's a PhD in the subject. In fact, a lot of the things now that are Econ 101, English 101, all those subjects I mentioned, the key learning outcomes and what the basics are that you need to have are known. We know what the basics are that a student needs to know. What we really need is somebody who can get that student's attention and keep it and get them excited about it and help them understand how it matters for their life.
I think a major, you're so spot on, a huge amount of the educational stress that we experience in our fabric of education comes from the lack of excitement of young people to care about their own education. And I think that does I think a lot of that is actually in the fault of the parent, and then in, of course, the fault of the community, the fault of the teachers, that kind of stuff. But there also needs to be some sort of energy that comes from within the kid to want to learn. So,
in fact, is that the only important thing?
Is figuring out how to get the inspiration from inside to learn. Well, also, I think the two
addicted to learning, how to get somebody to care about their brain.
And it comes, I don't know the exact, let's say, logical 50%, 50% or whatever it would end up being. I think that it does have to be in both places. It has to be from within, but there has to be an exterior community of teacher, parent, environment that fosters the curiosity to be insatiable as well. And so maybe a good example of this would be when you have like you were describing earlier, there's this amazing young teacher that knows how to, like an Aristotle from the back in the day, that can bring young people into groups and inspire them to have a multidisciplinary approach to knowledge and get them excited about learning through experiential learning and all this cool stuff, and then they can rocket off into specialties with different teachers. And so we're a little bit industrialized. We're a little commercialized in terms of our education, and it's kind of fitting a lot of if every human is a different shape, we're trying to fit them all through the square hole. And I think that is, some fit through the square hole, and I think some fit through circular, triangular, and trapezoidal holes. And that's that we need to make those different.
Well, I think that when you start to, unfortunately, commingle the concepts of education and economic return, unfortunately, you get into some uncomfortable situations that are not mostly about your whole person. Instead, it becomes about these other outcomes, primarily economic. Our slogan here, which is hard to read, is Plenum Vitae, the full life. And there's
Plenum Vitae, the full life.
Yes, because the science, the research that we have, the best research around from some Nobel Prize-winning economists, I believe he's at Princeton, and I forget his name in the moment, but he's basically shown that at $75,000 a year in salary average in America, your ability to be happier through an additional dollar of income is fully saturated.
It plateaus, happiness plateaus.
You won't get any additional happiness from an additional dollar. So like that's not to say that maybe, you can't spend your money then moving to somewhere you prefer or changing a career that you like, but your happiness from an additional dollar stops. So essentially the research shows that when you make 75 grand a year in the United States, then you have satiated your ability to become happier through the money. Mm-hmm. And so it's interesting in that context. You got
to focus on meaning or purpose in life.
Yes, partnership. Which humans do you share your life with? Yes. Yeah, how do you achieve something yourself? How do you feel like a sense of dignity? And this is a big question when you get into, sort of the desire to create social institutions that guarantee certain outcomes. Is if a person's outcome is guaranteed, then there's no dignity in achieving the outcome. And so when people are given the ability to
so much of our meaning and purpose in life comes from putting a workload on our back to go forth and achieve that goal.
Absolutely. Human beings are made to be challenged. We're made to explore. We're made to challenge ourselves and achieve things. And that's the beauty of a full life. And an education in that sense is no longer inserting rote facts and figures into your brain. It's opening you up to that garden so you can become the gardener, right?
Yeah, becoming the gardener. Can unpack this more for us? You were wandering us down education commingled with economics.
So currently in higher education, you hear a lot. I'll give you a specific story that's an example. So we went to this education conference in San Diego recently to represent Eazl. And interestingly, first of all, the higher education area was populated with human resource softwares and human resource solutions. Why would there be human resource softwares and human resource solutions at a basically university conference? It's because college degrees have gotten so expensive. So when there's such an element of expense in the college conversation, you now have to justify that expense, right? So now that's what I mean by commingling education with basically economic return. Now colleges are having to justify their price tag by saying you're going to earn more money. And while education is in part about earning more money, in fact, it's really about opening your mind to all these new possibilities and worlds.
Definitely.
And so I'm not saying that there's not an economic return, but it's unfortunate when the only angle that can be prudently explored when you get into the conversation of higher education is in the economic return of that higher education.
Yeah, we're almost excessively tying economic return to education to such an extent that it's causing a lot of corruption and crony capitalism that's going on within that fabric of what is a sacred opportunity to expand the mind of young people. And we also have things like adults, as you mentioned.
A lot of people now have been working in blue collar jobs or like whatever their situation is, and they're looking to get ahead in life. As we get into the knowledge economy, they're going into college to learn about how this stuff works. And I know that those people are more motivated by the career elements elements of a college experience, but they still, even I would argue that the honest career elements of a higher education are holistic, because we all now see more and more that teaching somebody to go be a coder when they don't want to be a developer, when they're not passionate about technology, it's going to fail. It's not a sustainable trajectory. So the idea.
It's interesting that you say that. Yeah. You say that because you know that there's so many people that are going into programming right now that don't even know if their soul is fulfilled through programming. Well, but it's because it pays $100K a year.
Yeah, and I would argue that you have to question is that whole theme of people going into coding driven by the demand for coders by major corporations? Because, now it's just accepted that we need more coders. And I don't agree with that. When we look around our communities, I think we need more coffee shops. We need more construction companies. We need more things that build community. People are starving for third places. They're starving for human interactions. But somehow everybody believes that if they're not a developer, they don't have any social status and they're not going to be economically viable. And I think that it's a crime that we've allowed the conversation to drift so far into the business needs of technology companies. And I'm not anti-technology company.
You're not at all. You're interestingly enough bringing in a very important perspective into the mix of nuance, which is that we have this massive demand of technology from business and coding in the sense, and we're like, okay, great, that exists. Now the idea isn't to just start funneling as many people as possible over there as without even looking at this other side of things, which is that we're starved in our communities for interpersonal love and meaning and purpose. Well, so how do we foster that? And they're good jobs, but we're also approaching kind of the automation of a lot of work and we can unpack that.
Automate a coffee shop employee or a business owner. It's hard to automate a restaurant owner. It's hard to automate these things that build community. So I would argue that those are sustainable drivers of value. And actually through equity crowdfunding, which is a securities law here in the United States and something that Eazl has started to crack the nut on, I believe that small business is starting to be able to find an element where you can actually make pretty good money from owning a small business. You need to do it in a community-oriented way and using specific laws that enable you to basically sell shares to the public. But I think that more and more, we're going to see that small business is a sustainable career path and that, development is kind of what you would call in business strategy a red ocean opportunity. That is that the developer talent pool is getting increasingly commoditized because it can be traded over the web, which means it can be traded all over the world. And now if somebody in the Philippines can code in the same way that you can code, and they're in the Philippines, they charge $20 an hour. And that's a fabulous wage for them. But if you're living in San Francisco, you can't live on $20 an hour. And so you're entering into a dynamic that's not favorable for you over the long term.
Oh gosh, okay. There's so much to talk about economics and education. We were just talking about economics and ecology yesterday.
Well, let's talk
with
about
Stephen Cutter. Quick to right before we get there, just the idea that we are coupling. We're now coupling ecology with economics. We're coupling education with economics, but we're not prioritizing economics over ecology or economics over education. It has to commingle.
Like the subject of economics, you're saying.
It has to co-live the process of innovation, creativity, business, intellectual property, globalization. These have to commingle and live with ecology at the same time and not take a step on it. And same thing with education.
Ecology, like as in the study of the earth and things like
that. And same thing with education and the study of the human mind being developed into the world. That I was just making a general point about
cost, stupid. And I'm not calling you stupid, but that's kind of a famous Bill Clinton phrases about the economy, stupid. I would say it's about cost, stupid. Why is the conversation going towards economics in education? It's because it's too expensive. If stuff is $500 like our undergraduate degree is going to be, then all of a sudden you're like, well, I don't care if it gets me a job that makes me $120,000 next year. I paid $500. I can go and do a boot camp after this degree, and then I will get right into whatever career field that I want to be in, and then you might have to take another boot camp in 5 years to get into another field. That might be the new norm. But when your undergraduate learning experience costs $70,000, then it better be making you money right out the gate, because you got to pay back the money. You got to pay back the loan.
Let's do this quick cost analysis. This is really important to address. So we have the normal sort of career path today. The education path that you do after high school will either take you into the workforce, into the military, into colleges. And when you choose to go into college, what your bet is that you're betting that you're going to earn much more money over your lifetime, which is just a true statement that you do, depending on what there's so much more nuance to it. But just to get back to the main thesis of this point, so there is a Harvard education, which is whatever, $200,000 for 4 years. There's a online education that you can get through places like Arizona State University that costs about $70,000. So you can take it from your home, but it's still going to cost you $70K.
The average degree costs $37,000 statistically in the United States.
$37,000 degree. So now this is 2 orders of magnitude less, almost, Eazl's degree.
Our degree is 1.5% of the national average cost.
Yes.
So like,
Yes,
we're basically reducing it by almost 100 times.
Yes. And so now this is now we should do a little bit of unpacking about what Eazl's offering in this course, but just the notion that I pay $500 for this is a non-accredited degree, but interestingly enough, you can walk into any job and showcase your skills, and they will, your portfolio, and they, after an Eazl degree, and they'll be like, whoa, how do you know all of these skills when someone else had to pay $50K for all of these skills, and they don't even know? Yeah, exactly. The way that you teach is so awesome, and you guys will have links in the bio to check this out. Definitely click through and look at this, but just the way that you've added, you're basically doing the thing that Aristotle was doing in today's digital age. You're taking all of these animations and these graphics and this voice overlay, and you're making it super fun and visually pleasing and educationally pleasing.
Yeah, I mean, we want it to be like the Matrix. We want to kind of program your brain. And the way that we do that is by using sound effects at the right time, by having definitions on the screen so you're reading them while a voice is saying them at the same time. Now you're having multiple vectors of information going into your brain, and that's going to enable you to remember stuff a lot more quickly. And you're going to go right from theory to watching somebody do it to doing it. And that means that you're going to basically be hands-on in moments. And that's a big deal.
I love the way that you're explaining this. So, and this is what we've had Chester Santos, who's a U.S. memory champion, on our show, and he had made it very clear that the more that you activate other senses when you're learning information, the better your recall is going to be. So, like you said, you're getting it visually, you're getting it auditorily,
yeah,
and that's huge.
Background videos. So, like, let's say that we're introducing a idea of communicating through an online ad, and there's some concept, what's remarketing, right? So now you're having the definition of remarketing on the screen, plus somebody saying the exact words that you're reading, plus you're seeing somebody go and see an ad for something that they saw 2 seconds ago. All of those things to get your brain all just absorbing it in the right way.
You said something else that's so crucial, which is that now you're not only watching somebody remarket, then you are going and remarketing yourself. Right, it's an application right away. You're going and applying your skills.
See somebody on screen do it, right? So now let's go do it. And you're going to watch somebody like me do it. And then it's going to be like, now you do it. Here's a step-by-step to do it. And now you've done it, right? So like hear, see, do. Really fast right into the stuff that you're doing.
Yes. And the hear, see, do this is a major part of the future of education. Huge part, this experiential learning, the doing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I can't argue with that. And I think that what it does is it transforms our community. We have about 150,000 students now around the world, and it transforms their relationship with us. Eazl is not a paternalistic figure telling you what to think. Instead, we are a tool that you can go to for the rest of your life. So you have lifetime access to all your coursework. And so you can imagine that maybe you don't need to do a macroeconomic analysis today on a country when you're taking your macroeconomics class. But then what you're doing is you're coming back in 10 years when your boss says, I don't know if we should open stores in Costa Rica. And now you go back to your course, which is all about doing the project. The theory is only there to support the doing.
By the way, Eazl's been updating the course over time, year after year.
Yeah, for our major courses, we update them every year so you know that it's fresh, and you go back and you're like, okay, I need to do a macroeconomic analysis now, and now you do it at work 10 years after you earned your degree. So instead of you having to feel like you have to know everything and be able to do it right now, that's not natural. That's not how we operate anymore. We have the internet. So now you know that you have these resources, but now you have the good resources and you know where they are. That's the primary value of Eazl, is that we've curated it for you.
It's so ridiculous that I'm not able to go back to the university was made, like you said, to be this massive place of data and collection of knowledge and wisdom. And why can't I go now in the digital age and just go tap into the university today? And I can go and pull some great coursework.
But it might suck. You know, it might suck because if you went back and you took your economics, if I went back and I took my macroeconomics class,
which would cost $4,000.
Yeah. And I took it from my alma mater, Sonoma State in California, then I would get pure theory about macroeconomics, about monetary supply and all that stuff. And while that's neat and it does raise my cognitive ceiling, it doesn't help me do very much. And so it's a little bit different to have lifetime access to a learning experience that is purely calibrated to doing something.
Versus just reading in the textbook. You're also doing. You're not just taking tests, but you're also doing.
And it's not quizzes, right? These are actual things that are useful. And I think that the use should drive your knowledge. For a lot of people, you need to go in, especially at the undergraduate level, and get your hands into it. See what you like. That's a big problem with education now, is that people get so wrapped up in studying these very tiny nuances of subjects that basically it only trains you to be a professor. It only trains you to be a professor.
And the multidisciplinary approach to knowledge is just immensely crucial for a foundation for a child. I tend to think that, and writing a lot about that right now. Okay, so let's make sure we talk about this. So as you get this lifetime ability to go back and tap into the newest courses that are being made by you guys, and give us a quick on the. We should definitely talk about the fact that your accreditation of Eazl, when you go and get Eazl, when that is then logged on a blockchain. That way, at any point, you're on a ledger and you're digitally on the ledger that you've accomplished these courses, that you are your ability certified.
Yeah. It's about smart contracts, and this is something we're building for the future. I have to reiterate that Eazl, primarily our goal is to make equal opportunity a real thing, because it's total bullshit that this is this idea that there's equal opportunity in America. I would argue that, and across the world, I would argue that in many ways, undergraduate education is the beginning of income inequality in the United States. It's the very first time that a young person actually becomes income unequal.
Correct, which means at literally after high school, which you can get a public education, at that point, you cannot go to the school to go learn what you want because it costs $40,000 a year.
Yeah, so the person of privilege goes through that experience with no debt, and then they can allocate any of the money that they make after college to whatever their dream is. And then the person who doesn't have privilege will be paying that off for the next 20 years, and they're forced into career paths that they may not like, right? So it's the literal beginning of income inequality. And so I wanted to bring that up there because, like, Eazl is while we are building for the future and the blockchain is important, our primary goal is to make higher education accessible for everybody. But when we talk about the blockchain, the reason that it is important, and it is an important point of access, is because of the future of decentralized organizations. And when you start to have decentralized organizations that are run through digital connection, through the blockchain, for example, then we believe that there's going to be a time in the future where a smart contract will want to verify whether or not you have a certain credential. And that's what we're building for. is to make sure that, if a smart contract says, hey, Alan, do you have video skills? And it's like, yep, Alan has video skills. He can come in and apply to work on this, or however the smart contract is going to work.
Yeah, that's huge. So I'm taking the different coursework, and then I'm accredited in that coursework. And then when I apply for a smart contract, it sees that I'm accredited there and that I can go and do that work. Mm-hmm. Now, okay, good. I'm glad we touched on that. Now, just give us a quick rundown on 150,000 students across the world. That's amazing. $500 to get a disciplinary degree. Now, can you go through the disciplines that you guys offer?
Yeah, I mean, we're a business school, basically. So, yeah, right now we've been teaching at kind of the master's level, which would say, I need to do Twitter ads now. I need to learn how to negotiate now. We have those type of courses that have been very successful. And then the undergraduate degree program we're developing is a well-rounded business education. And I focus on well-rounded because there are 2 out of the 5 sections that are not purely driven by economics and finance. They are things like
emotional intelligence.
It's just all sorts of things about the science of happiness, the relationship we call like ethnobiology, the relationships of human beings to the earth, things like sociology. We want to have something that offers a well-rounded education for people. The full life is our goal.
I love that. So you've made it very clear that knowing how to do Twitter ads now is equally as important as having a connection to other humans, and it's so important. There are actually quite a bit of overlaps between those two things.
Well, we reframe things a lot of times in terms of human centricity. Everything for us is about human beings. And so if you're going to be advertising on Twitter, you need to know that there's another human being on the other side of that screen, or your ad is going to suck. If you're going to create something, if you create a product or service, we want you to think about the person that's using that immediately. So as many times as we can, we're trying to fight against this idea that human beings don't matter. Human beings are currently the gods of the earth, and you have to realize that we are going to structure the world for other human beings. That's the only way we're going to do it, because we are the species that drives the development and the evolution of the entire planet and in the future of space.
Yep. That's exactly right. So fortunate to have evolved here and to now be in control, and we didn't really even realize.
It's a tremendous responsibility, right?
It's a tremendous responsibility, and we didn't even really realize that we were gaining control, and now we're like, oh crap, we're in control, and it's like, oh, we can't pollute the crap out of it. We have to actually sustain it over time, and we have to actually maximize the potential of the species to become interplanetary and all this other good stuff. Okay. That's been a great breakdown. I think we've covered almost everything that we really wanted to cover. I think something else on the way out that we should talk about is, in general, the future of education. We've been talking about it a lot right now. I think throughout this we've been talking about it, but I think especially with the onset of an advent of technologies like artificial intelligence, it's kind of changing the future of work, the future of human capital, the future of education. Now it's becoming more and more important for children to have robot-proof skills, to develop these skills. So go ahead and teach us about, like, what do you think about this gig economy? What do you think about the future of education?
Yeah, you better make it about humans. If you make it about humans, you're going to be sustainable. Human beings are the heartbeat of our experience here.
And tell us more about making it human-centric.
Well, I think like many technological experiences I've had, there's a lot of technologies that are hammers looking for a nail. I'm not fully bought in to the value of artificial intelligence for the last mile of value creation. I think that for places like Facebook that have oodles of data and self-driving cars that need to mine oodles of data constantly, then artificial intelligence is very helpful. But if you think about the things that matter to you in your life, mostly it's like eating healthy food, it's having a nice partner, it's having a successful family, it's being able to make enough money to pay your bills and to travel a little bit. And if you look at the price of almost all goods and services on the planet, they're plummeting. The only things that are raising in price are things that are associated with status. And in general at Eazl, we think that status is total bullshit, and it's a manipulation on the people.
I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity to do a little bit of virtue signaling. Virtue signaling is not a bad thing. It's actually something that's developed with evolutionary psychology, commingled with it along the path.
What do you mean
so
by virtue signaling?
Virtue signaling meaning that when we say things, when you and I say things like we don't believe in status symbols like having to wear massive gold chains or diamonds and having yachts and all this stuff. When we say those things, we don't say it because, oh, we're just too poor to afford it. Right. No, we just say it because we think that it's a major distraction away from the human-centric values.
What the heck do you need a gold chain around your neck for? I mean, and I'm not stopping anybody for whom that's a big deal. But if that's going to steer your life, then I think that you should reflect on that in general. And so when you look at the cost of airplane tickets, I mean, I was just watching The Godfather 2 the other night, and Michael Corleone's sister has to come to beg him for a ship passage to Europe. Yeah. They want to take a ship to Europe, right? It used to be so expensive. Yeah. Now, I mean, you can get to Europe for $400 from most places. I mean, Airbnb has Uber. All of these things have lowered the cost of traditionally luxurious things, the definition of disruptive business practices. So things and experiences are relatively inexpensive. What's in short supply is your values and how you look at the world, and looking at the world through a healthy lens that's about human beings and being kind and doing things that are sustainable and things that matter. And so for me, if artificial intelligence is a part of that equation, that's fine. But I don't really see that being disruptive to the last mile of value delivery in general. And I'm talking about, experiences like going out into nature, staying in hotels, having food that's delicious food and experiences that you like, going to the coffee shop, reading about ideas, experiencing culture, learning. A lot of that stuff is made by humans. So just keep focusing on the humans and you'll be fine. And for most people, I hope that they can get into government regimes that are going to be conducive to that. Because we do have a real global perspective at Eazl. Our students are everywhere. And so, the only time that you can get thwarted having that mindset is if you're in an unfortunate situation where the people in power are restricting that type of thing.
I agree with you so much about human centricity being at the center of prosperity.
Yeah, I like that. That's really what it is, about what is prosperity. Because, God, in the same movie last night, where I'm watching Vito Corleone, the young guy, he comes in to give his wife a gift and put it on the table. And it was, a nice thing for her to get. It was a pear. One pear, right? And like today, we go to the grocery store and we buy so many pears that they rot. We forget about the context that we're in. We are all so blessed and I'm not saying that from a religious standpoint, but just imagine the abundance we're surrounded by.
We have so much abundance.
It is fabulous.
You are really on point with the way that you're making it clear that it used to be a major deal to take a boat across continents, and now it's a quick plane ticket. It's much cheaper. You taking a taxi used to be a luxury. Now it's just an Uber ride away. And so I think that the way that this applies to human centricity is the more that we focus on the more we focus on our community's development and the fostering of really powerful experiences for humans to have with each other, for people to be self-actualized into the world, to have real, true equality of opportunity for people.
I would say that it's a competitive advantage. This is not about you being selfless from my perspective. From my perspective, this is a sustainable economic worldview.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Correct. And it really has to be coupled, a sustainable economic worldview, with the notion of prosperity. These things have to be coupled together.
To others. You have to create and give value to others for other human beings to value you. That's the fundamental of an economic exchange, of a voluntary transaction, right? Is that you have created something that somebody voluntarily wishes to give you money for. And so if they're not going to give you money for things that help you out, they give you money for things that help them out.
This is a classic balance between selflessness and selfishness, the ego and the egoless. And that is crucial to strike as we move forward. We've covered so much. I feel very enriched. I feel very blessed to have had the opportunity to talk to you about the future of education.
Fun. Yeah, and I can't help but introduce that, in a time when religion is on the run, in the United States and around the world in general. I mean, I think especially in the developed world, religion and people calling themselves religious is going down and down and down. But there are beautiful values to be found in what we've seen from history. And I'm not promoting any religious ideology at all or dogma, but if you think about, like, there's the Catholics have this value of caritas. They call it a cardinal virtue. And
what is caritas?
Caritas means love of the stranger, right? And that is the heartbeat. It's the lifeblood of a economically sustainable, prosperous, healthy worldview, is that you value people that you don't know, even to the point that you love them.
And if you do that, if everybody followed a morality like that, then there wouldn't be the violence and the corruption and the greed.
Well, it washes away the otherness. I believe that so I believe that, as Plato did, that every action has a good intent in its origination. That there's no pure evil in the world. There is just confusion. And most of the confusion comes from otherness, the concept of that there is an other apart from me. And so as you wash away that idea of the other and you embrace these ideas of human centricity, providing value for others, you're going to be just fine and very happy.
I love that. What a beautiful way to end. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Pleasure.
For enriching us. I feel like the lens with which we see the world has been augmented. I think that the garden that we're going to be growing with flowers and trees in it, we're going to figure out how to plant seeds and water them over time in more effective ways. I'm really excited for that. Definitely check out link in the bio for Eazl.co. Definitely go check them out. We'll have maybe a discount link potentially.
Yeah, sure. We can definitely look something like that.
We'll have some simulation peeps can get a discount to go try out some of the Eazl courses. Again, this is really important to take into account that this is kind of where we're heading. It's not going to be so much the massive conglomerates that are limiting and throttling the knowledge, but also propelling it. But we're going to have a decentralized and more of a colorful approach to the way that we do education moving forward. If you guys had a good time, definitely not only check out Eazl, but also go share with other people what you learned here. Go share with 2 people, have them share with 2 people. Let's spread the message. Let's keep the word going. Comment with your thoughts below. Let's start a little community chat. Subscribe. Join us on Patreon so we continue sustaining this and bringing it out to more people around the world. And Davis, thanks so much for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.